Oh, hi there. Welcome to Liberty.me live/free association or subtype of free association. As usual, the beginning of that probably got cut off. Liberty.me live. Again, I'll say it twice in case one of them was gone, or say it 3 times because twice is also nice. I am Lucy Steigerwald. I'm here with Sheldon Richman. Well, sort of. In an internet sense, I'm here with Sheldon Richman. And what are we talking about tonight? It's Groundhog Day. We were just talking about that fact.
Oh, I see you have the new Liberty.me cup.
Why, yes,
I'm wearing the Liberty.me shirt.
I know, it's disturbing. We did not
Well,
coordinate at
this is
all.
this is like a commercial broadcast. The first and Worthmar sponsor, Liberty.me.
It's like how members of the Clash would wear shirts that said the Clash on them. It's a bit redundant, but you know.
I just got mine yesterday, so I'm wearing it. There you go.
Go to the website you're already on, probably. And
I also have a little shot glass, but I don't use shot glasses. But
you might someday. You never know.
so we're supposed to be talking about the election. I know somebody noticed it's Groundhog Day, and I was thinking that aren't election days kind of like Groundhog Day for libertarians?
And I was struck by the tragic brilliance of this line. Though you don't have the consolation of Bill Murray being...
It's the same old thing. Yeah. Well, I guess as our tradition, I'm supposed to kick things off. I don't have a whole lot to say, so you're going to have a lot of chance to talk, Lucy. But I guess I'm not as depressed as I could have been.
All right.
From last night.
That is the highest libertarian praise.
Yeah, that's something to be grateful for. The way the evening started, it looked like it was going to be Trump and Hillary by, handily. That's the way the CNN was kind of showing it. At least those early precincts, and I was thinking, oh, this is going to be a terrible night. I mean, not that I wanted anybody to win, but I guess the people I least wanted to win were Trump and Hillary Clinton. I still have a nightmare of a November election day with the two of them. So I was happy to see that Hillary, basically it was a tie. She's claiming it as a great victory. She had, like 0.3 of a percentage point margin and only a couple of delegates. And I understand that a bunch of the state delegates, they have a very complicated system. A bunch of the state delegates, this was to pick delegates to go to a state convention, believe it or not, not to the national convention. The national convention delegates get picked at the state convention. So, wow, it's complicated. But I read, and I guess it's true because I read it in a bunch of places, even the Washington Post, must be true, and Daily Kos, that 6 of these state delegates she won by coin toss. In other words, there were ties in 6 different precincts, and the tie was broken by a coin toss, which she won all 6 of. Now, that wasn't 6 consecutive, as has been pointed out on the internet on my thread about this. That didn't mean that there were 6 coin tosses at one place, and they all came, for whatever she picked, heads or tails. I don't know what she was picking. This is 6 different precincts at different times. Anyway, I haven't seen that report on the CNN. They keep talking about her win, and they let her get on TV and talk about her great victory, but it hasn't been pointed out that 6 of these were by coin toss. You going to say something? Please say something.
There's footage of the one coin toss that I saw all over the internet where a woman is speaking, but I haven't seen any other footage of the other ones that apparently occurred. There does seem to be some confusion over whether that is what happened with the 6. I don't know. I'm a little uncertain about that, which is why I didn't include it in the piece I wrote for this afternoon. So
okay.
I'm not sure. It seems it's true, but
Yeah, not that I care much, but look, at best, she still only won by, what was it, 49.9 to 49.6 or something like that. It was.
Yeah, it was absurd.
It was very, very thin. And then on the other side, we have, I was very happy to see Trump not finish first. And in fact, I was happy to see him almost tied, in terms of delegate count, tied with Rubio for second, with Cruz winning. And Cruz was fading, so it's really a setback to Trump, who likes to claim he wins everything. So I was happy about that. Now, that doesn't mean I'm happy about the people who did well yesterday. As, my outlook on all elections is the good news is the losers lost, but the bad news is the winners won.
Absolutely.
That's my instant day after analysis, and I just leave it at that. So, they're just going to the next contest now on Tuesday in New Hampshire, and I cringe every time I think. In fact, I really was berating myself yesterday because in wanting to see Trump set back or humiliated, I found myself rooting for people I never in the world would want to root for. Trump and Rubio, please. This is horrible. These are terrible people. They take horrible positions. Cruz wants to make he wants to do a scientific experiment to see if sand will glow under carpet bombing at night. Okay, I appreciate the scientific frame of mind and the curiosity, but could he try maybe his kid's sandbox? Well, no, never mind.
Wait a minute.
Okay, with a little firecracker, carpet firecracker cracking. How's that? How about that? And Rubio, wants to go to war with Russia and takes all kinds of horrible positions. And I really want to rant about this for a second. We can get back to this, I'm sure, but just to put it on the record, has anyone noticed Rubio's slogan, the thing that's behind his head every time he speaks? The new American century. Now, there's a lot of ways to go at this. First of all, imagine if Putin was running for re-election and his slogan was the new Russian century. What would people like Rubio be saying? Or if anybody, a Mexican candidate for president, the new Mexican century. And then turn it the other way. I mean, what should Mexicans, Frenchmen, English, name your country? What should they be thinking about the idea of a new American century? It sounds a little threatening. Isn't that a little threatening? What does that mean, a new American century? So I just want to, now turning since Rubio is now coming up and is the darling of the establishment, I need to turn my fire on him.
Well, isn't that specifically the neocon? What's the project for a
new American century? Yeah, that's a Bill Kristol inspired. It's one of his many organizations that have identical boards of directors.
Rubio doesn't seem to be kidding around at all. He's the shiny new neocon pet, and
he's their guy, right? Isn't he their guy? I think.
Well, he might become their guy. That's what it kind of looked like.
Well, who do they like up till now? Cruz. They don't like Cruz because Cruz doesn't want to overthrow Assad. He just wants to go after. He wants to go after ISIS, but not. He's saying don't go after Assad. So they don't like that. And nobody likes Cruz anyway. Just on general principle, everybody hates Cruz. So.
General principle, and it's a great principle. Even libertarians, when he was elected, thought he might be at least another Rand Paul, and I'm gonna damn with fairly faint praise. He's not even that. He's actually far from that. He's significantly worse even, and he actually seems even less trustworthy. Not to say that any of them are trustworthy, but
So Rubio's got to be their guy. I mean, they might like Jeb Bush, but Jeb Bush is not going anywhere. He does have a lot of neocon foreign policy analysts. All of the people from the Bush 2 administration. So they would like him, but he's not going anywhere. It's got no traction. So
Rubio is the new George W. Bush, but he's diverse, so they can have that point in their favor. And his name isn't Bush, so it doesn't feel like quite the embarrassing oligarchical fraud that Jeb would have been. So I'm not surprised if he's their new boy.
Anyway, so that was my reaction. The last night and this morning. It could have been worse, but it's not going to be a great year because look who's running. Even if you think Rand Paul's not as dismal as I've been thinking he is, he ain't going anywhere. What did he get? Oh, he did beat Bush yesterday, 4-3. So there's something. But is he going to drop out? I mean, he's.
Well, I mean,
not going anywhere.
Thankfully, we don't have President Huckabee or President Rick Santorum. I learned a lot more about the processes in the last few days than I have normally because I always feel like I should know about the process of politics, if only to scorn it. But usually, I just my eyes glaze over because it's such a wretched thing.
Yeah.
What was I going to say in this?
So I don't know. So what were you watching the TV? Were you glued to the TV last night, and were you rooting against? Were you rooting against anyone more so than any other one?
I can't bear to watch. I mean, I am a journalist, more or less, but there's something about the spin room that is sometimes almost more repellent than the politicians themselves. Not literally, because they don't do as much, damage, but I can't watch it for hours at a time. I can't.
I thought since you're Playboy's new political correspondent, you'd have to be glued to the TV. But.
Well, I've done 2 articles, and it is a novelty to be writing about politics, but we'll see how long that lasts. It did force me to learn stuff, and to learn is not to condone. I always think that someone needs someone to report on politics while being contemptuous of politics.
Yeah.
But that doesn't seem to be in high demand because you generally need access to things in politics.
Right.
People want access, and they like being wined and dined. I mean, hell, I went as a guest of a reporter friend to the White House press correspondents' dinner about 4 years ago, and yep, it's pretty easy to see how that happens to people when you can be made to feel very special if you're one of the elite reporters on these terribly important people in D.C.
Oh, I always am disgusted by that annual dinner because it just shows you what the press is really all about, the media. I mean, there are exceptions, of course, but certainly the mainstream, the establishment, the corporate media, whatever you want to call it, they see themselves as the fourth estate, the fourth branch of the government. They like being.
That's such a bad expression. I mean, nobody ever stops to think the horrifying connotations of that terminology. It's very bad.
I think they do see themselves as part of that system. So that's why you don't get the skepticism. That's why if you watch CNN, their Pentagon correspondent really just delivers press releases from the Pentagon to us. They never bring anybody on. I mean, very rarely. I won't say ever. Who is skeptical about the entire framework of foreign policy. Sure, they may pick out people who will nibble at the edges, but very rarely. Maybe it's when they were having Glenn Greenwald on during the Snowden stuff, but it hardly ever happens that someone actually looks at the big picture and says there's something wrong with all of this, not just this little policy here, should we do that rather than that, but the whole big picture. And so they love being at that dinner. They like their court gestures, right? They get up and try to make the politicians laugh, and the politicians will reciprocate and get involved in skits and song parodies and stuff like that. So they're all entertaining each other. They're all dressed up. Yeah, I'll brag for a second. I spent the first 7 years of my working life as a reporter, and one of those places was in Delaware, where I covered the governor. It was Pete DuPont back then. Who, by the way, there was one time a Cato Institute favorite for possible presidential candidate. Never made it. But and I covered the state legislature. So when I was doing that in Dover, the capital, Dover, Delaware, they had a similar kind of annual thing. Yeah. And I didn't want to go. I felt I shouldn't be partying at taxpayer expense, and I didn't go. And I was like, people thought I was a party pooper because I wouldn't do it. And I wasn't trying to make a big scene. I didn't announce it. I just said, I'm not going to that. I would feel funny. It would violate my conscience. So I didn't go.
That's the problem. I felt I shouldn't. In many ways, I shouldn't go. But the temptation to at least observe. I didn't sell my soul. I just sort of dangled it in front of the proceedings, I think, by going. I suppose I owe the taxpayers a couple bucks for the meal. But, even the better people, who might not have been hacks. Here I am sabotaging all of my future career, hopefully. But this is insurance against ever selling out. All of this is always. I mean, it's hard, like, just to see it, you know. To see the very important people, you know, politicians and movie
Yeah,
stars and stuff starting.
I can understand the curiosity. Yeah.
The writer wants to observe as well, but it was as bad as you think it was, and at least I didn't applaud. And eventually, I stood once because some dude yelled at me, but I never applauded. And then afterwards, I just sat, and I was the only one sitting in the room. So
You think they'd be embarrassed by that?
I know. I'm still baffled by that. I feel
But they
better
just,
that I.
yeah. No, I think their attitude is, we're all in this together. It's us, meaning the press and the politicians, versus them, meaning the people at home.
And that's how, I mean, that is why hideous populist, potentially fascist people like Donald Trump appear. And that's why Fox News at its worst appears. You know, it's because the people who were there in the first place did such a shoddy job, you know. They were liberal authoritarians, and that's why you get these other things. I don't know.
Well, I guess we're sort of a little bit off topic, but it is part of the whole
It's
system.
definitely part of the whole thing.
No, it's true, because the same people are covering the elections.
Yeah.
And so you don't expect to get anything terribly interesting. It's just it's a horse race. They don't even ask good questions at debates. I mean, they try to the best they do is try to catch a candidate in a conflicting statement, right? You say, oh, this you said earlier, now you're saying this. How do you explain that? And Fox did that at the last Republican debate. They even had those video clips to get.
Yeah, I mean, they could have been worse. No, certainly.
No, I'll give them credit for that. I mean, I just wish stuff went a little deeper. It was more like, hey, Cruz, it looked like you were for amnesty a few years ago. How come you're not for amnesty now?
Right.
Stuff like that.
As you say, though, I mean, almost no reporter questions the existence of any institution. Well, you were talking about foreign policy, but any government institutions at all. Yeah. And I always think that there are, when the Snowden thing fell into everybody's lap, particularly Greenwald's, other places picked it up. They talked about it. It turned into at least questioning the NSA, talking about the NSA. It's not like they all said, nothing to see here, folks. They're not that blatantly awful. Mm-hmm. But they won't dig, most of them. They won't,
Yeah.
I haven't done it yet either. I'm talking big. But people with more confidence in their investigative journalism skills, people who could be good investigative journalists, so rarely dig. They don't question the existence of these things. Why does this exist at all? How much does it cost? Where did it come from? There's something about the news business that just doesn't lead to that, because it's very fickle and it's very based on the scary thing of today, the virus or the movement of ISIS or something much more inane, if they don't feel like talking about that. I don't know, the guarantee is short attention span. But this is an old rant, I suppose. Well,
I think they have this jumble of reasons, if you actually got them to spell it out. I think they do see it as we don't want to do anything to jeopardize national security.
Right.
But that also conveniently lines up with, we don't want to lose our access.
Right.
So we don't want to get them so mad at us they won't come on our programs. So nicely that all works together. So they can feel a little bit better about the acting in their financial interest, because they can justify it but it's also consistent with national security.
But there's still this. It's not. Sometimes like the purists, like I think you and I more or less. They turn into the people who are ranting in the far corners of the internet, which is fine, and I don't not recommend that. But there's potentially something to be said for trying to talk to or engage the awful people, or there might be. I don't know. I never know what you should do for these people. I always think back at Reason when I was editing a short interview that Jacob Sullum did with Gil Kurlikowski, the drug czar at the time. And I was joking, on GChat or something, can I add, I'm a stupid, dumb, jackbooted fascist person to his answers, Like Like, I would obviously never do that, but like, there you are, just, you know, giving him space in your magazine, asking him questions. I'm sure Seldom, you know, held him in total contempt
Yeah.
based on his writings, but there was still the sort of proper, I'll ask you a question, and I never know if there's good in that or not, or if you should be sort of LouRockwell.com huddled in the corner, sort of, you know, yelling at each other and not really engaging with the other people. I'm constantly at odds with this within myself. I don't know. I think there might be a middle road, but nobody takes it, actually, because you do want that access. Even in a non-corrupt way, you want to speak to people. You want to interview people you want to interview. You know, there's some logic to that, but I don't know.
Yeah. There are a couple of comments. I was going to say something about comments that on our in our chat area there. I was reminded by one of them that, and you'll remember this too, the way Bush and Obama and I guess past presidents have used those dinners in the most bizarre way. Right? Remember Bush making jokes about the missing WMD? Is that when he had pictures of him looking under the desk and under the couch for the WMD? As if, haha, this is a funny thing. And then Obama making jokes about what is it? I'll drone the Jonas Brothers if they're not careful with my daughters. I mean,
which is,
you know, he's good at killing people, as he tells us, as he admits, as he brags. But you just think there would be something in their heads that would say, no, don't say that, don't do that, that's not good. I mean, even if I'd like to, don't, you know, I'm not going to make jokes about where'd those WMD go. Well, maybe they're under my bed. What are they lacking up there that the rest of us have?
And there's still people who think that, this is what I wrote about for a reason when I actually went to the damn dinner. There are people who still think the presence of movie stars is what makes the proceedings undignified, not all that shit.
Right.
And of course you have, you know, Stephen Colbert heroically insulting Bush to his face in 2005 or 6, and then on his very last show, you know, doing a cute skit with Henry fucking Kissinger as if he's just a friendly old German fellow. You know, none of them can be counted on, really.
Right, or Jon Stewart fawning over Madeleine Albright every time she writes a new book, or when he had his program, as if she was not the woman who said, yeah, 500,000 Iraqi children dead, that's worth it. If it'll get rid of Saddam Hussein, that's worth it. We think it's worth it. For which she won a promotion from UN ambassador to Secretary of State by Hillary's husband, and I'm sure Hillary was all for that. Anyway. The candidates, yeah, it's a sad thing. Somebody was asking about the difference between a primary and a caucus on our in the chat room there, and just to quickly answer that, so we don't look like elitists, assuming everybody knows this esoteric stuff that we know. A primary, most of the states hold primaries. There are only a few caucus states, as I understand it. So a primary is just like an election day, except it's to pick a candidate rather than elect to the office. So that means anytime during that day, that Tuesday, from whatever it is, 7 to 7, you can walk in, go to the, mark your ballot, whether it's electronic or paper or whatever, chads or hanging chads. There's nostalgia from 2000. And then you go and you leave, and then they count the votes, and there it is. So that's a primary. It's just like an election, but it's for picking the candidate. A caucus is more complicated, which is why the turnout's always much worse, especially if it's someplace like Iowa where it's freezing cold and there's likely to be a snowstorm in the winter. Because you have to go. You don't just walk in any time during the day. You go at 7 p.m. I think it started. You go to your particular precinct, and you're going basically to a meeting. It's a caucus. A caucus means it's like a meeting where you argue about something. And so the Democrats and the Republicans do it a little differently in Iowa. But basically, you go and sit in the part of the room that's designated for your candidate. So there's a Clinton area, there was a Bernie Sanders area, there was a Martin O'Malley area, and then in the Republican case, I think there were speeches first where you can try to win people over and get them to move, and then you actually got up and moved if you got your mind changed. And then eventually they count votes. But that goes on for, I don't know, what is it, 2 hours or something? And so that's the difference. You're actually caucusing. Okay, that means there's some rumble and tumble and before your final decision is made. So just a little civics lesson there on the difference between a caucus and an election, actual election. I don't know how many states have caucuses, but I know what state has a caucus this year that never had one before. Kentucky. And you know why Kentucky's got a caucus this year? Wow. Because Rand Paul wanted to run for the Senate, keep his Senate seat, as well as run for president. And I guess there's a law in Kentucky that says you can't be on a ballot twice. So he got a friend of his in the legislature to switch the presidential process to a caucus. Now he's not on a ballot twice because it's not the same ballot. So it'll be a different day. I suppose you own caucus on the same day that you have a primary election. So he could, in that case, run for both. Clever guy.
Well, I think you might as well have a caucus because there's at least more yelling potentially and more. I don't know. I'm not that into democracy, but you might as well sit around with people and yell about this stuff, even if the same horrible people end up.
And then I guess you flip a coin if nobody wins.
Yes.
So I guess we can talk about candidates and what we have to look forward to, which is not much.
David also asks, did Trump not going to the last debate, did that hurt him in Iowa? Yeah,
good point. I thought it was pretty clever because that he before the election, because I mean he might have had an inkling that Fox was going to do what it did, which was show a bunch of contradictory statements by candidates earlier, and then say, you're saying something different today. How do you explain that? Megyn Kelly, I thought, did that pretty effectively with Cruz and Rubio. And maybe he had reason to think that was going to happen. And so by ducking out, he ducked out on I don't know how he would have handled that. That would have been very interesting because he's got, for everything he says today, in the fairly recent past, he said the opposite. He has said the opposite. I mean, it's down the line. So he would have had to answer that. That would have been embarrassing. And then he had the added thing, which a lot of people pointed out. I'm not making any original insights here. Everybody was dumping on Cruz with Trump not being there. And now the analysts are wondering whether Trump is wondering whether that was a mistake because it gave Rubio a chance to look
shine.
Good, I guess. Yeah, shine, look assertive and aggressive. And so he did well, and now analysts are wondering maybe Trump is wishing he hadn't done that. Although it's a close trade-off because he still would have had to face that barrage from Megyn Kelly, which would have been a lot of fun. I'm sorry we missed that, but he might still believe he made the right decision. Plus, I mean, he might have come out worse. Maybe Rubio would have beaten him, and he would have ended up third. So I don't think you can go back and say he made the wrong or right decision from his point of view.
Well, he's playing at being humble now, which is almost more disturbing than because it's like he's assimilating to the process, thereby making me think he might become more effective at it. With still, having the heart of a blowhard xenophobe. But now he can play. Second place is just fine with me. And after all,
it does take something away from him because he was the one who won everything, right? Right. He still says, I won every poll about who won all the debates. I'm real skeptical about that. I haven't seen anyone fact check that. Unless his people just go online and make sure they stack all those polls. But those aren't like Gallup polls, right? Those are online things where you go and vote who you think won. Right. And maybe his people are just better at doing that. But there's no way he won. I mean, even by any kind of standard, that he won every debate. There was some where he faded into. Remember, the next day people would say, "Where was Trump?" It looked like 40 minutes. He didn't even have anything to say during a couple of the debates. Just faded into the background. So, yeah, it's just typical Trump. I read a piece today. I think it was on Salon, maybe the last couple of days, about Trump has been planning this at least since 2013. That they had some notes from a meeting. They have some sources that say some Republicans came to him and wanted him to run for governor of New York a couple of years ago, and he said no but I may need you guys if I decide to run for president. And it was some meeting of Republicans where he said, here's what I'm going to do, and he laid it out. And they said, well, you can't, you'll never win Iowa by, are you going to do all those little, meeting, what do they call them, pizza ranches? I guess they have a string of pizza places in Iowa called pizza ranches. So you have pizza ranch events where you have to go to these things and shake hands. They, said, are you going to do that? And he says, well, I may do some of that, but I don't need to do that. I'm just going to get free media by making outrageous statements. And so it sounds like it was all, he planned the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, cultivating xenophobia is fairly effective, though. And it's like, just to trash the media more, though, it's like, I don't know, assuming that he can't get anywhere somehow made him effective, and then assuming he was inevitable made him effective. And it all resulted in him getting an absurd amount of attention, but also critiques. And then you have this sort of blowback situation, I think. Even though a billionaire New Yorker isn't exactly like the populist of the people, one would think. But I don't know.
But the gist of the article was that he understood that this method would had a good chance of working. Now, maybe in the end he's going to fizzle. We'll see what happens. But up until the balloting yesterday, things were looking pretty good for him, right? He was defying all the predictions that he was just going to fall flat. But the plan was there. I'll suck. The whole idea about I'll suck all the oxygen out of the room. I'll get all this free media. Every time I say something outrageous, I dominate the news cycle, and then when that begins to fade, I just say something else. My fans will love it because of the political correctness issue. I mean, it was all, like he has a knack for what it takes to be a demagogue in today's United States. Let's give him that credit at least. Now, it may not work. It may in the end not work. People may come to their senses. I thought it was interesting. CNN had these breakdowns of exit polling where they asked people what issues mattered. Not so much what factors mattered to them. And one of the biggest ones was shares my values. Okay, this is for Republicans. And Cruz won that, not Trump. Trump placed at least third. I mean, at best third, maybe worse. And then about winnability, Trump didn't win that either. That was Rubio won that. And then what Trump did win was, tells it like it is. But that's not what most Republican voters had as their top factor in picking a candidate. So maybe in the end his strategy isn't going to work. It didn't work in Iowa. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, of course. Again, we don't have President Santorum, and Santorum obviously wasn't even the nominee. And I believe Mitt Romney got second place in 2012.
That was very close.
Oh, I'm sorry. Wait. What?
Yeah. No. Yeah, it was Romney. And that was extremely close. I mean, they were, if you don't use decimal points, they each had like 25%. And Ron Paul had 21, I believe. So he was third and not that far back. Although he was looking better before Election Day, he was looking. I thought he would do better. You're right. Santorum didn't get the nomination. Huckabee didn't get the nomination 4 years earlier. The difference with Cruz is, I mean, Cruz has money. I think I don't know that Santorum had a lot of money. So history is not going to be just because Cruz doesn't get just because Santorum didn't get the nomination and the others doesn't mean Cruz won't. Although I think the big thing is that everybody hates Cruz.
Well, apparently
I don't know why. I never met Cruz. I don't know exactly why. I don't like him, and I only see him over the tube. He seems like a really smarmy used car salesman.
He does. And
he does,
I saw footage of him speaking to, can't remember if it was Medea Benjamin. It was someone from Code Pink who'd been protesting one of his talks. And I almost appreciated that he engaged with the person for quite a while, it seemed like, even though they'd been protesting. but by the same token, he engaged in an incredibly smarmy and condescending way. So it was sort of like, I mean, and that was like a highlight of my almost liking Cruz for a second for one reason. So yeah.
Yeah.
I actually
and too much religion talk. Too much religion talk. Rubio too.
Yeah.
Too much religion. I mean, when he said something like, "The body of Christ will rise up, and I'll be elected." Okay, I don't want to hear that kind of talk in a secular office. If you're running for deacon or something, fine, but
Are
please,
deacons elected?
please spare me that. Spare me that. The funny thing, and Rubio did that in the debate. He dropped Jesus' name every chance he could get. And what made it so funny was that there was already a story in the paper, I think in the New York Times, the Washington Post, a couple of days earlier about in the closing days of the Iowa campaign, Rubio was going to drop, God's name, talk about God as much as he could, and then he did it throughout the debate, which always takes the gloss off it when you've already telegraphed your strategy, right?
Right. There was a moment, and it sounds like a really, really softball liberal joke, but there was a moment when Rubio had a lead up, and I did not know if he was going to say Reagan or Jesus. Like a man we all, know. I really did. I was like, Reagan? No, Jesus. Okay.
Well, and he really stretched it when he was asked, Megyn Kelly or somebody asked him, what does he make of a recent Time Magazine article that said he, asked whether he would be the savior of the Republican Party. And his answer was, let me just say, there's only one savior.
That's why
Jesus Christ. Oh, come on.
That's why I thought it was going to be Reagan. That's right. That's exactly the moment. I was like, oh, Jesus, not Reagan. Okay.
Come on, the question was, would he be the savior? He's got to take that real literally. I don't want to say I'm the savior of anything. Come on. And this has nothing to do with one's view on religion. Okay, people may know my views about religion, but I think the criticism I'm making here has nothing to do with whether one likes religion or doesn't like religion. It's just the cynical use of religion. In fact, a very religious person ought to be offended by that, appalled by it.
I'm not religious either, but I do appreciate many libertarians and ANCAPs and such that I know that they hate the idolatry that comes up, like American flags in their churches and things of that nature. They hate that because it doesn't.
Yeah, and that Smarmy Ted said yesterday something like any president or any commander-in-chief that doesn't start the day on his knees does not deserve to be the commander-in-chief. Oh, come on. Come on,
and then
please.
I laugh in a juvenile fashion at that.
Gag me with a spoon, they used to say.
That's. Yeah.
I know, that's... I don't know what to say. I mean, this is politics. I'm reading, or maybe rereading, I don't think I ever read the whole thing, Mencken's great Notes on Democracy, a book he wrote in 1927, H.L. Mencken.
I've got to read some Mencken. Go on. I need to read some.
And you can find it on PDF online. I may have a first edition somewhere. I have an early copy, but I want to not mishandle it, so right, I'm using a PDF that I have on a tablet. And it's not a book we can let a libertarian, it seems to me, at least my style, a libertarian, I suspect your style, would embrace, because he was still kind of in his Nietzschean natural selection days. Yeah. I mean, I think he somewhat grew out of that phase. This was 27, so, in 1927, he was still, a fairly young guy. Well, he was in his 40s, I guess, not that young. And so, he doesn't like democracy because he thinks that's the rule by the inferior mob. Right. So he tends to be an aristocrat, but on the other hand, he doesn't want a fairly limited government, so at least let's give him that. But I think, as libertarians have pointed out lots of times, and I may write something about this because it's time to do it again, is that we are actually proposing a third way between democracy and aristocracy. Right. When we put down democracy, it's not because we want aristocracy. And when we put down aristocracy, it's not because we want democracy in the sense of, the people vote on everything or have some political say on every matter in other people's lives. We don't want that, right? Right. People shouldn't be able to vote that I don't get to use my car on Wednesdays because somebody else wants to use it. I mean, we don't like that.
And one
Well,
can
we don't want a monarch or nobleman also deciding what days I can and can't use my car. So we propose self-government in the real sense of self-government, not the collective sense of self-government, but the individual.
Right. Exactly. You needn't be sort of a creepy, for the philosopher kings and only the best can rule. You needn't be like that to still have contempt and, alarm about like democracy and sort of masses deciding because after all, it always comes down to if the masses are so bad at running, if people are sort of, worthy of some amount of scorn, then how could they possibly run everyone else's lives in addition to their own in any sort of fashion,
Yeah.
I mean, even the misanthrope should go back to the self-rule thing in the end. They just don't tend to, unfortunately.
Yeah, so Mencken didn't have a well thought out political philosophy. I think he didn't like the idea of abstract philosophy anyway. He didn't like metaphysics and ethical theories and stuff like that. I mean, he had some good intuitions, but one thing I'll be looking for in the book, because I don't remember whether he ever gets to this point. He has this idea that the bulk of the human race are congenitally inferior in terms of intelligence. They're ruled by fear, and right. So except for this natural elite, we can't trust these people with power, which is fine, but not for the reasons he says. Because the distinction we would want to make, and I hope he makes it somewhere, is that people are smart in their own lives. They're only stupid in the political realm because of the kind of thing that Brian Kaplan and others have written about, Ilya Soman, namely that the incentive system is so different, right? The costs and benefits are split. When you vote, you have only one little vote, which means you have no incentive really to learn or study anything because the consequences to you're only going to pay a little sliver of the cost, even if your vote is with the majority, right? There's a wedge between action and consequences and between costs and benefits. And so people are smart in their own lives generally, not everybody, but when they buy a car, they check it out first. They ask friends, what's a good car. They're much smarter because of the incentive system.
Right.
You don't need to resort to inborn intelligence or anything of that nature. So I'm wondering whether he had any inkling of that. That'll be interesting.
Yeah, I haven't read enough direct Mencken. I'm certainly not. Oddly enough, I read a biography of him because he's one of those authors who wrote a ton of stuff, but biographies of him tend to be in print, whereas his stuff is actually less available at sort of a small library. Not to admit that I, commit the unlibertarian act of going to libraries. That would be a shocking revelation.
Well, he certainly had some gems when it came to politics, because he's the one who famously said, at least famously for me, said that elections are sort of advanced auction sales of stolen goods. Everything else is a footnote. Everything else is commentary, right? Everything else is a footnote to that. That's really all you need to know about day-to-day politics.
About slitting throats and raising the black flag, or whatever the hell that is.
I don't remember that one. I know he said democracy is the theory that the people know what they want and deserve to get it good and hard.
Right. When you see
Trump running around, I think I wish Mencken were around.
Yeah.
I mean, he would have had a good time with Trump because he encountered people like Trump.
That's what That's what we need. I mean, we do need, he had plenty of flaws, but someone who actually has the proper contempt. He famously hated FDR, I know. Just contempt for politicians needs to be a virtue among political reporters, but I'm not seeing that as likely to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, he saw through them. He knew a fraud when he saw one. He didn't get everything right. I mean, he was very hard on William Jennings Bryan, but never gave Bryan credit for opposing entry into World War I and resigning from the cabinet. resigning from Wilson's cabinet. He was Secretary of State. Can you imagine that happening today? Of course not. And I was thinking, Rick Scott, is it Rick Scott in Michigan with the Flint, the water issue? If this were Japan, Rick Scott would have to go on TV and commit suicide, right? Harakiri, because of that. Instead, he goes on TV and says, I apologize. Yeah, now let's move along to the next issue. He doesn't even resign.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the Janet Reno thing, right? That's the Janet Reno style, taking responsibility, which means you simply say the words and keep your job and your prestige and your power.
I take full responsibility. Go ahead.
I love the inner working. It's horrifying. The inner, it's come out that state people in Michigan, in Flint, were drinking. They were getting water coolers and bottled water and stuff. Long before anyone admitted how bad the water was and stuff.
Right.
It's just, they think they're better than us.
Like a year before.
They're better. They know it every day when they wake up.
No, in politics, the phrase "I accept full responsibility" is, bureaucratese for. That's all I'm going to have to say about this issue. Let's move on. That's what that means, right? Because if you ever come back and say, yeah, but what did you do? I already took full responsibility. I don't have to answer any more questions. That's what that means. I mean, Hillary did it with her server, so on and so forth. Everybody does it.
And of course, in cases when someone actually resigns, like Nixon, or when there's, CIA torture, there's still let's move forward from that unfortunate incident,
Yes, we don't want recriminations. That's another. No, we shouldn't look backwards. Why can't a common criminal in court plead, look, why are we looking backwards? Let's look forward. Why should there be recrimination? Yeah, I'm a serial killer, but let's look ahead. There's a bright day ahead. That
would be great.
I know. Why?
America needs to move forward, all right? That would be fantastic. That would make an actually good comic, getting our point.
Yeah, like a Saturday Night Live sketch, if they really wanted to go after Obama and over the torture issue.
Yeah, that would have been good.
I know, it just shows you there are two classes. There's the ruling class and there's the rest of us. And the press is pretty much, in the ruling class. They're the sort of the hangers-on, right? They don't really have power, but they feel they're close enough to it that they can feel like they have some power. And now for a little musical interlude.
I should answer on here. It's my boyfriend. I should just answer and be like, I'm on a podcast right now. Man,
I told you never to call me during a podcast.
That's right. I have told him that. He knows better.
Well, we only have a few minutes left. I see 7 according to my clock. So any closing words on what do we have to look forward to in this election season?
Unrelenting misery. There's always the schadenfreude that comes with someone losing. Never forget that. It's very important.
That's what I live for. Schadenfreude. That's all I got.
Someone's going to be disappointed.
And Huckabee, it wasn't enough. I need more than that. Santorum. There'll be a little bit from Santorum. Santorum's really bad. I mean, Santorum is the one who said, hey, wait a second. Liberty is not a conservative value.
Oh, well, he's honest. I mean, he's not playing the small government game at all. He has no interest in even pretending to court the libertarian contingent. I almost appreciate that. But not as much as I appreciate how much he's failed in the past 4 years.
Hey, here's a guy who lost by 18 points in his re-election bid for the Senate in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Okay, the Pennsylvanians wouldn't send them back.
Yeah.
18 points he loses. He's the incumbent. Come on, you gotta have done something stupid.
He just being Rick Santorum is enough to get you.
Yeah, we won't talk about the entry in the Urban Dictionary.
Oh yeah.
By that name, that's not fitting.
My grandmother, who is now 98 years old, I believe 3 or 4 years ago, she knew it was something inappropriate, but she wasn't sure. But we're
not going to talk. Audience, look it up yourself. We're not going to say. It's not. It's disgusting.
I'm just saying, she knew. Even she knew that the meeting had been redefined. So I salute you, Dan Savage.
I'm surprised. I guess Santorum was never any threat to Trump because Trump would have pulled that one out in a debate against him.
Even
I guess he never was. I noticed he went on the stage when Trump held his simultaneous event for the veterans. Trump was on. I mean, Santorum joined him, as so did Huckabee actually. Huckabee was talking about what a great guy, how much he likes Trump. I thought Huckabee's this preacher. Same with Santorum, right? They're supposed to be these paragons of religious virtue. They're hanging out with Trump.
Don't forget 2 Corinthians. That's totally
2 Corinthians walk into a bar. Bartender says, "What is this? Some kind of joke?" But why are they hanging out with Trump? Trump is the guy that bragged about all the married women he slept with. All kinds of stuff. Because
they're charlatans, but thankfully not very effective lately. So.
He's their new BFF.
Yeah. I never realized someone that William Crystal hates so much could still be so contemptible. It's an important life lesson. Even if William Crystal hates someone, it doesn't mean that they're good.
I know. Well, and as you know, our friend Justin hectors me, and you too, I guess, for not loving Trump because of who his enemies are. Right?
Well, I understand he's trying to differentiate between rooting for and supporting, but
I know he hasn't endorsed them. I understand, but he just thinks we should have a different attitude toward Trump because Crystal and the National Review gang and the Weekly Standard gang hate him, and he hasn't convinced me on that.
Principles don't work that way for me. I just don't, because that sort of attitude has been so bad for the world. That's how you ally with Stalin to get to take care of Hitler and things of lesser versions of that. It doesn't. I mean, that's how bad things happen. to decide that the enemy of the other horrible fellow is your buddy. That's just not how principles.
And I don't think Trump has any core beliefs. And he may say today, we don't want to fight Russia, but that's only because a couple of his opponents sound like they do want to shoot Russian planes out of the sky. Right. So. He can differentiate himself by saying he doesn't want to do that. But if he were the president who wants to have, as he put it, a military so powerful that no one will mess with us, what would he do if Putin just does something that Trump regards as messing with us?
Right.
He doesn't define messing with us.
In any sense. Like, I understand what Justin and his ilk, what straws they're grasping at, but they're much flimsier than they're acting like. I mean, even Sanders is much weaker on this issue than we're going to have a democratic socialist. I prefer he be a little more substantial in the anti-war thing as opposed to just better than better than Hillary sure doesn't take much.
Oh yeah, in fact, I posted on Facebook today an article by Bruce Fine, who's on the right, and Juan Cole on the left about the hawkish Hillary. So left and right agreeing that she's horrible, and Sanders is really missing a bet. I don't understand what the calculation is there that he doesn't want to talk about, and what he said about foreign policy is bad. Right? We got to get the Saudis more involved. The Saudis have been very involved. Without them, there'd be no ISIS or Al Qaeda. Thank you. They've been pretty involved.
I know it's odd how much he's downplayed this, Sanders.
I don't get it. I'd love to know why he's making this decision to basically give her a free pass. I mean, he could go after her over Libya and her declaration of basically open season on Assad, and lay the whole mess at her feet.
Well, because he's still partisan enough to let her slide. That's the truth of it. He's the crazy socialist who tells it like it is, but he still doesn't. Well,
also because he can't do that without also at least implicitly criticizing Obama, and he doesn't want to do that.
Right, yeah.
So his hands are tied. Well, he's tied them. I don't mean they were tied by somebody else. He's tied them because he doesn't want to look like he's critical of Obama's foreign policy because maybe he thinks, well, I don't know what he thinks. But I would love to know what was going on the inside.
Yeah.
Because that's He's he's no Kucinich. Why isn't Kucinich an advisor to him saying, here's what you got to do. Here's how you can beat Hillary. Maybe it's because they think the base has no problem with that farmhouse.
Yes, we'll see. Generally, they're all easily swayed into the war. But
I'm sure we're going to have more chance to talk about this because it's a long way to November. Although we promised folks not to talk about it every time because
cheery like war.
no one will show up, and I wouldn't blame you. I'll stop showing up. All right. Well, it is top of the hour.
Well, we started 5
minutes. You have anything to plug?
Well, I'll plug Will can't pronounce his Italian last names show, which is tomorrow. Unbiased American at Wednesday at 8. I think Will's going to be on my Thursday podcast. And I anticipate a great deal of yelling because I have streamed it well on podcast before. So that might be fun and worth watching. In general, well, Sheldon's work, Free Association blog, his Patreon, so you can be a patron.
Any war?
At Reason.
I'm now officially a columnist at Any War.
Right. I don't mean to forget that.
Share the list with Lucy.
Right. And weirdly, I have now written 2 political articles for Playboy.com, and I hope to write more.
I haven't seen the second one yet, so that's great. So now there's a reason to buy Playboy.
Well, I'm not in the print. Dude.
Okay. There's a reason to go online.
Yeah, the print mag has some serious literary cred over the years. Like, you don't even know. I have a whole rant about mainstream women's magazines are so inferior to male ones, even if they're arguably sleazy. That's the whole thing. Playboy was very literary. Anyway, but I'm on the website, and it's good. So people should go look at that.
Okay, post the link on Facebook. I didn't see the link on Facebook, so if you think of it, post it so I can read the second article. That's a breakthrough. So, follow Lucy at Any War and Playboy and other places.
Yeah. Do that.
And we'll be back in 2 weeks with
more Shepherd subjects.
More good news.
Right. More good news.
All right. See ya.
Good to talk to you as always. Thanks, chat, and thanks, audience, current and future YouTubers. Goodbye.
Bye.